The earth shook as the giant Ymir, a being of pure chaos and primal fury, clashed with the gods of Asgard. His breath alone could summon storms, and his footsteps carved valleys into the land. The sky itself seemed to tremble as Odin, the All-Father, rallied his brothers to strike down the monstrous titan. This wasn't just a battle, it was the dawn of creation, a struggle that would shape the very fabric of the cosmos. And yet, this epic confrontation is just one of countless tales where giants and gods locked in world-shaking combat, their stories echoing across cultures and centuries. Today, we're diving deep into 30 of the most awe-inspiring, terrifying, and downright bizarre myths about giants and their endless wars against the divine. From the frost-covered realms of Norse legend to the sun-baked temples of Greece, these stories reveal more than just cosmic brawls. They expose the fears, hopes, and imagination of ancient civilizations. What is it about giants that captivated our ancestors so deeply? Were they symbols of nature's untamed power or reflections of humanity's own struggles against the impossible? These myths aren't just relics of the past, they pulse with life, filled with betrayal, ambition, and even unexpected moments of humor. You'll meet giants who built mountains just to challenge the gods, others who stole the very sun and moon, and some who, against all odds, became unlikely allies to the divine. But here's the twist: many of these stories have been twisted, forgotten, or outright hidden over time. Some myths were rewritten by the victors, while others faded into whispers. So consider this a journey into the shadows of legend, where we'll unravel the truth behind these colossal beings and their divine rivals. By the time we're done, you'll see these ancient battles in a whole new light, not just as tales of might and magic, but as windows into the human soul. The stakes, nothing less than the fate of worlds. The players, beings so vast they could cradle mountains in their palms, and the lessons, well, let's just say the gods didn't always walk away unscathed. Ready to step into the arena of myth? Then brace yourself, because history's greatest clashes are about to come roaring back to life. Long before the Olympian gods ruled from their thrones on Mount Olympus, the earth itself gave birth to a race of giants so fierce even the heavens trembled at their fury. These were the Gigants, monstrous beings born from the blood of Uranus, the fallen sky god, as it soaked into the earth goddess Gaia. Towering, serpent-legged, and hungry for vengeance, they rose from the soil with one purpose: to overthrow Zeus and his divine siblings. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was a war that would decide the fate of the cosmos. The Gigantomachy, the great battle between gods and giants, wasn't just brute force against brute force. It was a clash of cunning, desperation, and even betrayal. While the giants hurled mountains like pebbles and breathed fire that scorched the skies, the gods had a secret weapon: the aid of mortal heroes. Without Heracles and his poison-tipped arrows, the Olympians might have fallen. Without Athena's wisdom, they would have been outmaneuvered. And without Dionysus, of all gods, wielding his ivy-laced staff to drive the giants mad with divine frenzy, the tide might never have turned. But the conflict ran deeper than muscle and magic. It was a struggle between order and chaos, between the new reign of the Olympians and the raw, primal forces of the earth. The giants weren't just mindless brutes, they were manifestations of nature's fury, of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions given flesh, and their defeat wasn't total. Some myths whisper that not all the giants perished, that a few escaped, waiting in hidden corners of the world for their chance to rise again. What makes the Gigantomachy so compelling isn't just the scale, it's the irony. Gaia, who once helped Zeus overthrow his own father, now turned against him, her own children becoming his greatest threat. Even in victory, the gods knew their rule wasn't absolute. Every storm, every tremor beneath their feet was a reminder that the earth itself could one day reclaim its power. While the Gigantomachy raged in Greece, far to the north, an even colder and more relentless conflict was brewing. one where the line between gods and giants blurred in a tangle of blood, betrayal, and inevitable doom. The Norse Jötnar weren't just enemies of the Aesir gods, they were their twisted reflections, their inescapable fate. These frost giants embodied the untamed wilds beyond Asgard's golden walls, their very existence a threat to the gods' fragile order. But this wasn't a simple tale of good versus evil. Some Jötnar, like Loki, walked the halls of Asgard as both ally and saboteur, while others, like the fire-wreathed Surtur, waited patiently for the day they would reduce the world to cinders. The feud between gods and giants wasn't just a series of battles, it was a countdown to Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. Every clash, every broken oath, every monstrous offspring of Loki's schemes brought the cosmos closer to its fiery end. Imagine a wolf so vast his jaws could span the sky, a serpent so long it encircled the earth, and a ship made from the nails of the dead crewed by an army of ghosts. These were the weapons the Jötnar would unleash when the final battle came, and yet the gods couldn't resist their pull. Odin himself sought wisdom from the giant Mimir even after severing his head. Thor, the great giant slayer, couldn't resist testing his strength against their might, whether wrestling the crone Elli or battling the giant king Utgar, the Loki, in a contest of illusions. What makes the Norse myth so chilling is their inevitability. The gods knew Ragnarök was coming. They knew Surtur's flames would consume the 9 realms, that Fenrir would devour Odin, and the world would sink beneath the sea. Yet they fought on, not to prevent the end, but to meet it with dignity. The frost giants weren't just destroyers, they were the embodiment of chaos, the necessary counterbalance to the gods' order. Without them, Yggdrasil, the world tree, would wither. The cycle of creation and destruction demanded their wrath. Even Loki's role defies simple villainy. Yes, he engineered Baldur's death and rallied the forces of chaos at Ragnarök, but he was also Odin's blood brother, a trickster who played both sides until the game consumed him. His children Fenrir, Jörmungandr, Hel weren't mindless monsters. They were inevitability given form, the consequences of the god's own actions. When Surtur finally swings his flaming sword and the old world burns, it's not a punishment, it's a reset. A promise that from the ashes something new will rise. The frost giants don't just bring the end, they make rebirth possible. These myths force us to ask uncomfortable questions. What if the monsters we fear are part of the natural order? What if destruction isn't failure but transformation? The Norse didn't shy away from these truths. They stared into the blizzard and saw not just death but the seeds of the next world waiting beneath the ice. In the swirling mists of Hindu cosmology, where gods dance atop lotus blossoms and demons lurk in shadow, the war between the Devas and the Daityas raged like a never-ending storm. These weren't just battles, they were cosmic chess matches where every move echoed across lifetimes. The Daityas, often called Asuras, weren't mere brutes. They were titans of intellect and power, their ambition as vast as the universe itself. Born from the same sacred lineage as the Devas, they shared their divine blood yet stood as polar opposites, light against shadow, order against chaos, but with a twist that defies easy morality. Take Indra, king of the Devas, whose thunderbolt could shatter mountains. His greatest rival wasn't some mindless beast, but the Daitya king Bali, a ruler so devout and generous he once held the entire universe in his palm. Vishnu, the preserver, had to intervene not with brute force but with cunning, taking the form of a dwarf to outwit Bali's boundless charity. This wasn't just a victory of gods over giants, it was a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the mightiest could fall to their own virtues. And then there's Hiranyakashipu, the Daitya who conquered heaven itself. His tale is a masterclass in divine irony. After years of penance, he gained a boon that made him nearly invincible. No man or beast, no weapon forged or natural could kill him day or night, indoors or out. But Vishnu, ever the strategist, took the form of Narasimha, half lion, half man, and tore him apart at twilight on a doorstep, neither day nor night, neither inside nor out. The message, even the most absolute power has cracks, and the cosmos always finds a way to balance the scales. What makes these clashes so gripping is their depth. The Daityas weren't just villains, they were mirrors held up to the Devas, reflecting their flaws and fears. When the ocean was churned for the nectar of immortality, it was the Daityas who helped the Devas stir the waters, only for the gods to betray them at the last moment. The line between hero and villain blurs, leaving us to wonder who were the real usurpers, and through it all, Vishnu's role is pivotal. He doesn't just defeat the Daityas, he outthinks them, playing the long game across countless incarnations. From the cosmic tortoise Kurma supporting the churning rod to Krishna advising Arjuna on the battlefield, his interventions are less about domination and more about restoration. The Devas may win the battles, but the war never truly ends, because in Hindu thought, balance isn't a destination. It's a constant, delicate dance where even the giants have their part to play. The Fomorians weren't just giants, they were nightmares given flesh, a race of twisted beings who ruled Ireland with an iron fist long before the Tuatha Dé Danann ever set foot on its shores. With one eye, one arm, and limbs like gnarled tree roots, they embodied the wild, merciless forces of nature. Some had the heads of goats, others hides as rough as bark, and their breath could wither crops or summon storms. To the early Irish, they were the ultimate symbol of oppression, lurking in the misty edges of the world, demanding cruel tributes from anyone brave or foolish enough to cross them. But the Tuatha Dé Danann, the godlike tribe who would become Ireland's protectors, refused to bow. Their arrival sparked a war that would decide the soul of the land itself. At the heart of this conflict stood Lug, the radiant young hero whose mastery of every art made him the Fomorians' greatest threat. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a strategist, a poet, a blacksmith, a living weapon forged to break their tyranny. When the Fomorian king Balor, whose single eye could kill with a glance, demanded submission, Lug answered with a sling stone to that very eye, striking with such precision that Balor's own deadly gaze erupted backward, consuming his army in a blaze of cursed fire. What makes this clash so gripping isn't just the violence, it's the deeper symbolism. The Fomorians represented stagnation, hoarding Ireland's bounty while its people suffered. The Tuatha Dé Danann, in contrast, brought growth, wisdom, and the sacred arts. Their victory wasn't just military, it was cultural, a passing of the torch from chaos to order. Yet even in defeat, the Fomorians left their mark. Some legends say they retreated to the ocean's depths, becoming the ancestors of later maritime monsters. Others suggest they weren't entirely evil, just forces of imbalance, necessary in small doses but catastrophic when unchecked. Lug's triumph echoes beyond myth. He didn't win through brute strength alone, but by uniting the Tuatha Dé Danann's diverse talents, proving that harmony could topple even the most monstrous foes. And in that lesson, we see the heart of Celtic storytelling, where darkness and light aren't simple opposites, but intertwined forces, each shaping the other in the endless dance of creation. The waters of chaos churned long before the first brick of Babylon was laid, birthing beings older than time itself. Among them rose the Anunnaki, primordial giants whose very names carried the weight of the cosmos, gods of the deep earth and endless sky, yet locked in a war that would reshape creation. Their struggle wasn't just for power, but for the soul of existence, a battle etched into the clay tablets of the Enuma Elish, Babylon's sacred creation myth. At its heart, Tiamat, the mother of all, her serpentine body a tempest of salt and storm, and Marduk, the storm god who dared to carve order from her chaos. Tiamat wasn't just a monster, she was the living ocean, the void that predated light itself. When her husband Apsu, the freshwater abyss, grew weary of their unruly divine offspring, he plotted to destroy them. But Tiamat hesitated until her children struck first, slaying Apsu and igniting her wrath. What followed was a rebellion of cosmic proportions. she birthed an army of horrors, serpent men with venom for blood, lion demons with scorpion tails, and 11 terrors led by Kingu, her new consort, who wore the tablet of destinies like a crown. With this divine decree, Tiamat could rewrite the laws of reality itself. Enter Marduk, a younger god whose very presence crackled with the energy of a gathering storm. The gods, desperate, offered him kingship if he would face Tiamat. His price, absolute authority. Armed with winds as his weapons and lightning as his spear, he rode into battle atop a chariot of hurricane-force winds. The clash was cataclysmic. Tiamat opened her jaws to swallow him whole, but Marduk hurled winds into her belly, swelling her until she couldn't close her mouth, then pierced her heart with an arrow. From her corpse he crafted the heavens and earth. Her ribs became the vault of the sky, her weeping eyes the Tigris and Euphrates. Kingu fell next, his blood mingling with clay to form the first humans, destined to serve the gods forever. But here's the twist: Marduk's victory wasn't just about brute force. It was a masterstroke of politics. By elevating him, the younger gods overturned the old order, replacing Tiamat's primordial chaos with a rigid hierarchy. The Anunnaki, once rebel giants, were neatly folded into this new regime, their power co-opted rather than destroyed. Even Marduk's 50 names, recited at Babylonian coronations, weren't just titles, they were a divine spreadsheet, assigning each Anunnaki a bureaucratic role to keep them in line. What makes this myth so compelling is its raw honesty. The Enuma Elish isn't just a story, it's a divine coup, a propaganda piece justifying Babylon's rise to dominance. Marduk's triumph mirrors Babylon's own ascent, its kings claiming his mantle to legitimize their rule. And Tiamat, she's the sacrificed mother, her body the price of progress, her chaos the foundation of order. Yet even in defeat, she lingers. Every flood, every storm is a whisper of her name, a reminder that creation and destruction are two sides of the same tablet, waiting to be broken and remade. High above the fifth sun, where the firmament bled into endless night, the Tzitzimitl waited skeletal giants clad in stars, their ribcage gaping like celestial jaws. These weren't mere monsters, they were the hungering dark between constellations, deities of eclipse and oblivion who dreamt of devouring the sun itself. To the Aztecs, their existence was existential calculus. If the sun god Tanatia faltered even once, if his daily battle through the underworld left him weakened, the Tzitzimitl would plunge the world into eternal midnight. Their name meant those who descend with fury, and descend they did during solar eclipses, when the sky turned bruised purple and day became unnatural twilight. The Aztecs believed these moments were battles writ large across the heavens, Tanatia locked in combat with the star giants. Priests would slash their ears, offering blood to strengthen the sun, while commoners beat drums and shouted, as if noise alone could scare the Tzitzimitl back into the void. But the giants had allies, celestial midwives, strangely enough. Itzamna, the cosmic crocodile, was said to summon them to punish humanity for arrogance, their bony fingers plucking souls like overripe fruit. What chills the spine about the Tzitzimitl is their dual nature. They weren't just destroyers, they were purifiers. In Aztec cosmology, chaos wasn't evil, it was necessary. The Tzitzimitl represented the reset button, the cosmic threat that kept both gods and humans humble. Even Tanatia, for all his brilliance, owed his throne to sacrifice. Before him, 4 previous suns had been extinguished, their eras ending in jaguar attacks, hurricanes, and rains of fire. The Tzitzimitl were the ever-present reminder, no rain lasts forever. Yet some myths hint at a grimmer purpose. The goddess Itzpapalotl, a Tzitzimitl queen, was said to guard the paradise of Tamonchen, a realm where the first humans were created from the bones of past worlds. Her skeletal wings cradled both life and death, suggesting these star giants weren't just executioners, but midwives of rebirth. Every eclipse was a contraction in the cosmic womb, every descent a chance to prune the universe so new growth could follow. Modern eyes might see them as apocalyptic, but the Aztecs understood nuance. The Tzitzimitl were the shadow to Daityas' light, the silence to his song, and without them, the dance of existence would stumble. Their teeth, after all, were made of the same stardust as the sun. Amid the howling gales and crashing thunder of Japanese myth, the Oni emerge hulking, horned giants with skin like fire or storm clouds, wielding iron clubs as if they were twigs. These weren't just monsters, they were incarnations of calamity, their very presence twisting the natural world into chaos. Born from the souls of the wicked or forged in the darkest corners of the underworld, the Oni represented everything the Shinto gods sought to tame: disease, famine, the unchecked fury of nature. Yet their most infamous foe wasn't a solemn guardian of order, but the tempestuous god Susanoo, a deity whose own rage mirrored theirs until he turned it against them. Susanoo's legend begins with his exile from the heavens, cast down for his violent tantrums that uprooted forests and poisoned rivers, but in his fall he found purpose. Arriving in the land of Izumo, he discovered a grieving family whose seventh daughter was marked as the next sacrifice to the eight-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi, a creature so vast its coils crushed mountains. Here, the line between Oni and God blurred. Susanoo, the storm himself, didn't approach this battle with divine dignity. He schemed. He tricked the serpent into drinking itself into a stupor with vats of sake, then hacked it apart, uncovering the sacred sword Kusanagi in its tail, a weapon that would later symbolize imperial power. This wasn't just a victory, it was a lesson in turning chaos against itself. But the Oni's role in Shinto belief runs deeper than brute violence. They were paradoxes, destroyers, yet also divine punishment. During Setsuban, the festival marking winter's end, people throw roasted soybeans to drive Oni away, shouting, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa achai," a demon's out. Luck in, yet in some villages, masked Oni perform ritual dances to purify the community, absorbing misfortune before vanishing into the night. Even their iconic tiger skin loincloths hint at complexity. In Chinese lore, tigers ward off evil, so why dress demons in symbols of protection? Because the Oni weren't just enemies. They were the necessary shadow to the god's light, the chaos that made order meaningful. Susanoo's legacy encapsulates this tension. After slaying Orochi, he didn't ascend back to heaven as a chastened hero. He ruled Izumo, flawed but revered, his storms both feared and prayed for. The Oni, meanwhile, lingered at the edges of maps and mines. Some say they haunt abandoned battlefields, others claim they guard hidden treasures, their brutality a test for worthy mortals. In a world where even the gods could be capricious, the Oni reminded humanity that balance wasn't gentle, it was forged in clashes of roaring wind and grinding teeth, where every demon driven out left room for a harvest to grow. The waves had never known a fisherman quite like Maui, not because of his strength, though he had plenty, but because of his audacity. When the people of Polynesia cried out that their rivers ran dry and their crops withered, Maui didn't just cast a line into the sea. He cast a challenge to the gods themselves, the culprit a colossal eel, slick as obsidian and longer than a valley, its coils clogging the freshwater springs beneath the islands. To the villagers, it was a monster. To Maui, it was a riddle waiting to be unraveled, one that would prove even the mightiest giants could be outwitted. His plan was pure mischief. First, he carved hooks from the jawbones of his ancestors, each barbed with the teeth of sharks. Then came the bait, not fish, but his own blood, drawn from his nose in a ritual offering. As the eel surged from the depths, drawn by the scent, Maui didn't reel it in, he let it swallow him whole. Inside the beast's belly, he hacked at its organs with his sacred fishhook, not to kill, but to carve. The eel thrashed, its body splitting into pieces that became the first coconut trees, their husks still bearing the marks of its scales. Water gushed from the wounds, filling the rivers once more. But here's the twist that elevates this from mere monster slaying to cosmic brilliance. Maui didn't just defeat the eel, he transformed it. Every part of the creature became a gift. Its flesh fertilized the soil, its teeth became tools, and its blood, mixed with clay, gave life to the first kava plant. Even its severed head, flung into the sky, became the constellation Matariki, a celestial reminder that destruction and creation are threads on the same net. What makes Maui's victory so iconic isn't the scale of the battle, but its ingenuity. Unlike the thunderous clashes of Greek or Norse myths, this was a duel of wits. The eel wasn't some mindless foe, it was a force of nature, a literal blockage to life's flow. Maui's triumph wasn't just about freeing the water, it was about proving that even the gods' designs could be reshaped with clever hands and a defiant laugh. And in that defiance, we see the heart of Polynesian storytelling. The world isn't fixed, it's fluid, waiting for someone bold enough to tug its threads loose and weave them anew. Yet the myth lingers with a quiet warning. When Maui's brothers grew greedy, hacking the eel into smaller pieces for themselves, the springs they created turned brackish. Balance, the story whispers, isn't just about taking, it's about knowing when to stop. Maui's genius lay in seeing the eel not as an enemy, but as a partner in the dance of survival. Cut too deep, and even miracles turn to salt. Deep in the forests of ancient Slavic belief, where the roots of the world tree twisted into unseen realms, two forces waged an eternal war, not with armies, but with the very elements themselves. On one side stood Perun, his beard forged from lightning, his chariot rolling on thunder. Opposing him coiled Veles, serpentine lord of the underworld, his scales slick with the damp of marshes and the whispers of the dead. This wasn't just a feud between gods, it was the clash of fundamental truths: the storm's order against the swamp's chaos, the sky's wrath against the earth's cunning. Veles was no mindless beast. As god of cattle, wealth, and the unseen waters beneath the soil, he ruled the liminal spaces, the boundary between village and wild, the moment between life and death. His theft of Perun's sacred cattle wasn't mere thievery, it was a cosmic provocation. By dragging the sun itself into his watery domain during winter, he forced the world into imbalance, leaving Perun to hunt him through the branches of reality. Their battles weren't confined to myth. When lightning struck a tree, splitting it to the roots, Slavs saw Perun's axe striking at Veles hiding below. When spring rains swelled the rivers, it was Veles' blood spilled but never vanquished, yet their relationship defied simple rivalry. Veles wasn't purely evil, nor Perun purely just. In some tales, they were bound like yin and yang, Perun's lightning fertilizing the earth Veles ruled, their conflict ensuring the cycle of seasons. Folk rituals even honored both. Farmers would pour offerings into the ground for Veles while raising hammers to the sky for Perun. This duality mirrored Slavic life, where the same forests that provided game could harbor wolves, where rivers nourished crops but drowned the unwary. The most haunting twist lies in their shared end. Christian missionaries recast them as devil, and Saint Veles became the horned tempter, Perun a stand-in for Elijah the Thunderer. But fragments of the old truth lingered. Even as Perun's oak groves were felled, peasants kept Veles' beards of unharvested grain, a pact with chaos to ensure next year's order. Their war never truly ended, it just hid beneath the surface, like Veles waiting in the roots or Perun's lightning sleeping in the summer heat. The drums of Yorubal and still echo with the footsteps of the Urnmol, the primordial giants who shaped the earth before the first cities rose from red clay. These vast beings weren't mere monsters, they were living mountains, their bodies carved with rivers, their breath stirring the Harmattan winds. And when the Orishas, the divine forces of order, descended from the heavens, their clash wasn't just about domination. It was a negotiation of the very essence of reality, where fire, stone, and storm debated how the world should breathe. At the heart of this cosmic struggle stood Shango, the god of thunder, whose lightning was less a weapon and more a language. His battles against the earth giants were symphonies of force and finesse. Take the legend of Agemo, the chameleon giant whose skin mirrored the sky itself. When Shango's lightning struck, Ejimo didn't crumble, he adapted, his scales shifting to absorb the blow. The Orisha didn't win through might alone. He danced, letting his axe, his divine energy, syncopate with the giant's rhythms until Ejimo, exhausted, sank into the earth, becoming the rolling hills of Oyo. This wasn't destruction, it was transformation, chaos reshaped into landscape. Yet the most profound conflict lay with Orunmila, the Orisha of wisdom. Facing Olokun, the giant of the depths whose coils could drown continents, Orunmila didn't raise a hand. Instead, he cast his sacred palm nuts, their patterns revealing a truth as old as time. The ocean's rage was just another form of longing. Olokun wasn't evil, it was lonely, starved for the touch of the sky. So Orunmila wove a chain of moonlight and dropped it into the abyss, tethering sea to heavens. The giant's fury stilled, becoming the tides, its size the salt spray of Lagos beaches. What makes these myths extraordinary is their refusal to paint giants as mere obstacles. The Urunmol were partners in creation. Even in defeat, they gifted the world. Their bones became iron deposits, their sweat the morning dew. When Shango's lightning split a giant stone hand, the fragments didn't vanish. They became sacred thunderstones kept in shrines to this day. And in the festival of Egungun, when masked dancers channel ancestral spirits, their towering costumes whisper of those ancient colossi, their legacy stitched into cloth and memory. These stories pulse with environmental wisdom. The Yoruba didn't see giants as invaders, but as embodied forces: drought, flood, earthquake, that demanded respect, not eradication. Shango's victories weren't about conquest, but balance. Strike too hard and the earth cracks. Listen closely and it teaches. Even now, when lightning splits a baobab, elders nod knowingly. That's not just weather, it's the old dance continuing, the world still being shaped by gods and giants in quiet conversation. Every night, as the sun god Ra's golden bark dipped below the horizon, the waters of the underworld turned thick with treachery. Lurking beneath the currents coiled Apep, the serpent of annihilation, a beast so vast his body could encircle the world. This wasn't just a monster, it was the embodiment of primordial chaos, a force that predated creation itself. While other gods battled giants for dominion or revenge, Ra's fight was existential. If Apep ever triumphed, the sun would be swallowed whole and the universe would unravel into endless night. The stakes made their clash a ritual etched into the fabric of time. Ra's journey through the 12 hours of darkness was less a voyage and more a siege. Standing at the prow of his bark, the god Set often a troublemaker, but here a stalwart defender, speared Apep's gaping jaws with a lance tipped with magic. Thoth, the god of wisdom, chanted spells to paralyze the serpent's coils, while Ra's light seared its scales. Yet no matter how many times they struck Apep down, the serpent always returned. This wasn't a battle that could be won, only endured. What makes Apep so terrifying isn't just his size, it's his inevitability. Ancient Egyptians didn't see darkness as mere absence of light, but as an active, hungry force. Solar eclipses were moments when Apep gained ground, his shadow devouring Ra's disk bite by bite. Priests conducted elaborate rituals, burning wax effigies of the serpent and inscribing curses on pottery to shatter, symbolic acts of resistance against the void. Even the stars played their part, as the constellation Meskhetiu, the plough, was said to be the god's harpoon, eternally poised to strike. But here's the twist: Apep's role wasn't purely destructive. By forcing Ra to fight each night, the serpent ensured the sun god remained vigilant, his light never growing stagnant. In a way, Apep was the whetstone against which Ra's divinity was sharpened. Without the serpent's threat, the cycle of rebirth, dawn emerging from darkness, would lose its meaning. The Egyptians understood that some enemies aren't meant to be destroyed, only held at bay, their relentless pressure forging resilience. The myth echoes in unexpected places. When Osiris, god of the dead, judged souls in the underworld, those deemed unworthy weren't cast into fire, they were fed to Apep. Not annihilation, but assimilation into chaos. This suggests a chilling truth. Even in death, the Egyptians feared not punishment, but irrelevance. To be swallowed by Apep was to cease existing in any form, erased from the cosmic ledger. Yet for all his terror, Apep was never worshipped. No temples bore his name, no offerings were left to appease him. He was the adversary who made worship necessary, the shadow that gave Ra's light its worth. Every sunrise wasn't just victory, it was a reminder that some battles are eternal, and survival itself is a kind of triumph. Before light, before time, before even the concept of up or down, there was only swirling chaos, a cosmic egg holding all existence in its shell. And within it slept Pangu, a giant so vast his eyelids were like thunderclouds, his breath the first wind. When he awoke, cracking the egg with a swing of his axe, what happened next wasn't just creation, it was the ultimate sacrifice. For 18,000 years, Pangu pushed the heavens upward with his hands and pressed the earth downward with his feet, growing taller each day to keep them apart. His bones became mountains, his blood rivers, his sweat the rain that nourished the first valleys. Even his voice lingered as thunder, his final sigh becoming the wind that still rustles through the trees. But here's where the myth takes a startling turn. Unlike other creator giants, Ymir, whose corpse was exploited by Odin, or Tiamat, whose body was weaponized by Marduk, Pangu's transformation was voluntary. He didn't fall in battle, he chose to dissolve into the world. This makes him uniquely noble among giants, a being whose death wasn't conquest but communion. Later Chinese myths would echo this theme in conflicts like the Battle of Zhorong, where fire giants challenged the celestial bureaucracy, yet none matched Pangu's selflessness. The legacy of this myth is etched into the land itself. In Guangdong province, the Dangxia Mountains' rainbow-striped cliffs are said to be remnants of Pangu's axe strokes. The Yellow River, his pulsing veins, and when earthquakes rumble, some traditions whisper that it's Pangu stirring in his sleep, still stretching beneath our feet. His story isn't just a creation tale, it's a reminder that the natural world isn't inert. It's alive, charged with the energy of a giant's final gift. What fascinates scholars is how Pangu's myth evolved alongside later god-giant conflicts. In Taoist texts, the heavens eventually grew jealous of Earth's vitality, sending storms and floods to curb its growth. But the Earth, infused with Pangu's essence, fought back not with armies but with resilience. Mountains shrugged off typhoons, rivers swallowed droughts. This tension mirrors older themes. The giants may lose their battles, but their essence lingers, shaping history in ways the victors never anticipated. Perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the quiet epilogue. Pangu's left eye became the sun, his right the moon, eternal witnesses to the world he birthed. Every sunrise isn't just light returning, it's Pangu blinking, checking on his creation. And when eclipses darken the sky, some say it's the giant briefly closing his eyes, dreaming of the egg he shattered so long ago. High in the Andes, where the air thins to a knife's edge and the stones seem to whisper, the Inca spoke of a time when giants walked the earth not as gods or monsters, but as unfinished things. These were the Puran runner, the stone giants, their bodies rough-hewn from the mountains themselves, their strength enough to topple peaks. But they lacked one crucial thing: hearts. Without compassion, without reverence, they grew arrogant, hurling boulders at the heavens and scorning the creator god Viracocha, who had shaped them from the clay of the earth. Their rebellion wasn't just defiance, it was a rejection of the very order that sustained the world, and Viracocha's response would rewrite the landscape forever. The flood came without warning, not as a gentle rising, but as a roaring wall of water unleashed from the glaciers, scouring the valleys clean. The stone giants, for all their might, couldn't outrun the deluge. As the waters surged, Viracocha didn't just drown them, he transformed them. Their flailing limbs stiffened into jagged cliffs. Their terrified faces froze into the rock walls of the sacred valley. Even today, if you walk the slopes near Cusco, the stones seem sculpted with agonized expressions, silent witnesses to divine wrath. But this wasn't mere punishment. It was alchemy. The giants' bodies became the bones of the land, their rebellion repurposed into foundation. What makes this myth so haunting is its duality. The flood wasn't just destruction, it was the world's baptism. From the drowned giants, Viracocha molded a new humanity, this time from lighter clay, people who would honor the earth rather than dominate it. The story echoes in Inca engineering, their terraces carved into mountainsides like sacred staircases, their stones fitted so tightly even a blade of grass couldn't slip between. Every wall was a reminder the giants' pride had built nothing, but humility could shape empires, yet the myth lingers in the land's restless energy. Earthquakes, the Inca believed, were the stone giants stirring in their rocky tombs, testing their bonds. When tremors toppled temples, priests would recite the legend anew, not as a warning but as a plea for balance. Even in defeat, the giants served a purpose, their imprisoned fury a reminder that creation and chaos are partners in an endless dance. Viracocha hadn't erased them, he'd woven them into the story, turning their rage into the very bedrock of civilization. Modern travelers might miss the deeper lesson. Those faces in the stone aren't just tourist curios, they're the Inca's way of saying the land remembers. The giants weren't vanquished, they were waiting, their stories etched into the earth itself, whispering that even gods must sometimes reshape the world with fire and flood to make room for what comes next. The skies over Suma darkened the day. The zoo bird spread its wings, each feather the length of a cedar tree, its talons sharp enough to carve canyons into stone. This wasn't just a beast, it was a force of pure rebellion. The tablet of destinies, etched with the laws that bound gods and mortals alike, rested in Enlil's sanctuary until Zu, watching from the mountaintops, saw his chance. With a screech that split the heavens, he snatched the tablet mid-flight, sending the divine assembly into chaos. Suddenly, the very fabric of order unraveled. Rivers forgot their courses, stars stalled in their paths, even the gods found their powers flickering like guttering lamps. The theft wasn't just an act of theft, it was a coup against creation itself. Enlil, king of the pantheon, stood humiliated. His storm winds died in his throat, his commands fell hollow. The other gods, trembling in their temples, knew recovery required more than brute force. Ninurta, Enlil's warrior son, volunteered first, but his arrows shattered against Zu's feathers like twigs. The wise E intervened, whispering a strategy as subtle as it was ruthless: exploit Zu's hunger for legitimacy. The bird, now drunk with stolen power, had begun mimicking the god's rituals, perching on Enlil's throne, reciting decrees it barely understood. So Ninurta returned, this time wielding words instead of weapons. "Keep the tablet," he taunted, circling the bird, "but can you wield it?" As Zu fumbled the incantations, Ninurta loosed a single arrow not at the beast, but at the wing holding the tablet. The moment it slipped from Zu's grasp, the heavens realigned. But here's what most retellings miss: Zu wasn't just a thief. In older fragments of the myth, he's called the Knower of Destinies, a title hinting at deeper motives. Some scholars argue the bird sought not just power but equity, to redistribute divine authority in a pantheon that hoarded it. The Tablet of Destinies didn't just dictate fate, it decided which gods received offerings, which mortals prospered. Zu's rebellion then becomes a protest against hierarchy, a demand for chaos's rightful place in the cosmic balance. Even his punishment carries irony. Rather than execution, he's chained to Enlil's gate as a guardian, a constant reminder that the system he challenged now depends on his vigilance. The myth's endurance lies in its layers. On one level, it's a thrilling heist gone wrong. On another, it's a parable about the fragility of power. But perhaps most strikingly, it mirrors Suma's own political upheavals, usurpers seizing kingship tablets, only to collapse under the weight of unearned authority. Every time a storm cleared the dust from Earth's ziggurats, it whispered the same lesson: destiny isn't held, it's earned, and sometimes the greatest threat to order isn't its enemies but its own complacency. Beneath the fiery heart of Mount Etna, where molten rivers carved tunnels through the earth, the Cyclopes toiled in a symphony of sparks and thunder. These one-eyed giants weren't just the mindless brutes of Odysseus' nightmares, they were the architects of divine power, their hammers shaping weapons that would define the fate of gods. When Zeus stormed the heavens to overthrow the Titans, it was the Cyclopes who armed him, forging the lightning bolts that would become his symbol of absolute authority. But their alliance with Olympus wasn't born of loyalty, it was a pact forged in mutual need. The gods required their mastery of fire and metal. The Cyclopes, long scorned as monsters, craved recognition. Hephaestus, the limping god of the forge, understood them better than any Olympian. Cast out of heaven for his deformity, he found kinship with these outcast giants, learning the secrets of their volcanic workshops. Together, they crafted wonders: Poseidon's trident capable of splitting continents, Hades' helm of shadows which cloaked its wearer in darkness, and Artemis' silver bow, its arrows never missing their mark. Yet the Cyclops' greatest masterpiece was Achilles' armor, a suit so radiant it blinded enemies on the battlefield. Their forgers didn't just produce weapons, they birthed legends. But the relationship between gods and giants was never simple. When Apollo's son Asclepius used divine knowledge to resurrect the dead, Zeus struck him down with a Cyclops-forged lightning bolt, only for Apollo to retaliate by slaughtering the very giants who'd crafted it. The Cyclopes, caught in the crossfire of divine grudges, became both tools and casualties of Olympus' whims. Even Hephaestus, their closest ally, couldn't shield them forever. When the forge god trapped Hera in a golden throne as payback for her cruelty, it was the Cyclopes who freed her, hoping to curry favor with the Queen of Heaven. Their reward, exile back to the volcanic pits, their service repaid with betrayal. What makes their story so tragic is its duality. The Cyclopes wielded power that shaped the cosmos, yet remained pawns in the gods' games. Their forges glowed with the fires of creation, but their own fate was written in ashes. Later poets would reduce them to cave-dwelling cannibals, erasing their legacy as craftsmen, yet every time lightning split the sky or a hero raised a god-forged sword, the echo of their hammers lingered. Even Hephaestus' final act honored them. When he built automatons to tend his workshops, they moved with the same rhythmic precision as the Cyclopes, a silent tribute to the giants who taught him that true strength lies not in the arm that wields the hammer, but in the hand that guides it. The lesson here is as searing as molten iron. In mythology, as in life, those who empower others are often the first discarded when their usefulness ends. The Cyclopes built the tools of divinity, yet never tasted its privileges. Their single eye wasn't just a physical trait. It was a metaphor for their singular focus, their ability to see deeper into the heart of fire than any god. And perhaps that's why they terrify us, not because they're monsters, but because they remind us how easily creation can be twisted into destruction, and how the line between ally and outcast is drawn by the whims of the powerful. Before the first sunrise, before even the concept of time took shape, there was only the yawning void of Gigantomachy, a chasm so vast and empty it made the darkness between stars seem crowded. And in that nothingness, two opposing forces collided, the searing winds of Muspelheim and the frozen mists of Niflheim. Where fire met ice, the giant Ymir was born, a being so ancient his body was the universe itself. His sweat became rivers, his hair forests, his skull the very dome of the sky. But Ymir wasn't alone. From the warmth of his armpit sprang the first frost giants, while the cow Ortumbler licked the salty ice to free Beri, grandfather of the gods. This wasn't just creation, it was a family feud written in blood and starlight. Odin and his brothers, Vili and Vi, watched the giants multiply with growing unease. The cosmos couldn't sustain such chaos. Ymir's unchecked spawning threatened to drown existence itself. So they made a choice that would define Norse mythology forever. they turned on their ancestor. The battle was less a clash than a dissection. Odin's spear found Ymir's heart, and as the giant fell, his body became raw material. His flesh spread into the earth, his bones the mountains, his teeth scattered as boulders. Even his eyebrows were repurposed as the wall guarding Midgard, the realm of humans. But the most haunting transformation was his blood. It gushed forth in such torrents that it drowned all but two giants, Bergelmir and his wife, who escaped in a hollowed-out tree to become the progenitors of a new frost giant lineage. This act of deicide wasn't just violence, it was alchemy turning carnage into cosmology. What makes Ymir's story so profound is its moral ambiguity. The gods didn't slay him in self-defense, they murdered him to impose order. The Eddas describe Ymir as neither evil nor benevolent, just existent. His death was less a victory than a necessary crime, the foundation of the world literally built on a giant's corpse. And the Norse understood the weight of this. Every earthquake was Ymir stirring in his grave. Every winter, when the frost giant's breath crept south, it was a reminder that the old chaos still resisted its chains. Odin's role here is equally complex. He doesn't emerge as a hero, but as a pragmatic revolutionary. By wading into Ymir's blood, he stained his hands so the world could begin. Later, he'd hang himself from Yggdrasil for wisdom, as if seeking forgiveness from the cosmic order he'd disrupted. The message is clear: creation demands sacrifice, and even the All-Father isn't exempt from its price. Yet the myth whispers a darker truth. However mighty the gods became, the giants were always their shadow. Ymir's descendants would plague Asgard for ages, culminating in Ragnarök, where the cycle would reset, and the world once again would drown in primordial soup. The Norse didn't believe in permanent victories. Just as Ymir's body birthed the world, his essence would one day reclaim it, proving that in the end, even gods are just temporary tenants in a giant's bones. Beneath the emerald canopies of Lanka's golden palaces, where the air hummed with dark magic and the scent of crushed lotus blossoms, Ravana's Rakshasas ruled with a terrifying elegance. These weren't just demons, they were scholars, sorcerers, and shapeshifters, their powers honed over millennia. Ravana himself, the 10-headed king, had earned his throne through brutal penance, his devotion so fierce the gods had no choice but to grant him near invincibility. But curses linger longer than boons. His arrogance, his abduction of Sita, and his defiance of cosmic law would ignite a war that reshaped destiny itself, Rama's righteous crusade to dismantle an empire built on stolen power. The Rakshasas' origin story is drenched in divine irony. Born from the breath of Brahma as he slept, they were originally intended as guardians of the cosmic order. But power corrupts, and the Rakshasas soon twisted their divine gifts into weapons. They could vanish into shadows, assume the forms of loved ones, and whisper spells that turned entire villages into feasts. Yet for all their might, they weren't unstoppable. Each bore the mark of their creator's disappointment, a vulnerability woven into their very being. Fire could unmake them. Sacred mantras could freeze their blood, and Rama, the exiled prince who wielded Vishnu's essence in mortal flesh, was their living antithesis. The battle for Lanka wasn't just armies clashing, it was a contest of ideologies. Ravana's brother Vibhishana, who defected to Rama's side, proved that not all Rakshasas were monstrous. His loyalty exposed the clan's fatal flaw: they'd traded wisdom for power. While Ravana surrounded himself with sycophants, Rama's camp thrived on diversity: monkeys, bears, and even a reformed Rakshasa united by purpose. When Hanuman set Lanka aflame with his burning tail, it wasn't just a tactical strike, it was a metaphor. The Rakshasas' illusions couldn't survive the light of truth. Rama's final arrow, tipped with Brahma's own energy, didn't just pierce Ravana's hearts, it unraveled the curse that made him untouchable. In that moment, the Rakshasa king remembered his oldest blessing, a prediction that his end would come only when he forgot his own invincibility. By underestimating a mere mortal, he'd sealed his fate. The lesson echoes through the ages. No curse is stronger than hubris, and no empire built on stolen light can outlast the dawn. On the storm-lashed cliffs of Tory Island, where the Atlantic winds howled like dying warriors, Balor of the Evil Eye brooded in his tower of black stone. The Fomorian king wasn't just a giant, he was a walking catastrophe. His single eye, sealed beneath 7 leathery lids, radiated annihilation. One glance could wither crops, boil rivers, or turn armies to charred bone. Even his own kin feared him, for Balor's power was a curse, prophesied to be his undoing. A druid's warning haunted him. His own grandson would one day destroy him. So he locked his daughter Ethlyn in a crystal tower, away from all men. But fate, like the tide, cannot be commanded. Enter Lug, the radiant stranger who arrived at Tara's gates with no pedigree but every skill. A master of harp and sword, a poet who could outwit kings, he was the answer to the Tuatha De Dannan's despair. For years, Balor had bled Ireland dry with his titanic tributes, his Fomorian hordes choking the land like a plague. When Lug volunteered to lead the charge against him, the gods scoffed, until he hurled a stone sling so precise it shattered a distant oak. The message was clear: this was no ordinary warrior. The Battle of Moichera wasn't just a clash of arms, it was a duel of destiny. Balor's eyelid creaked open on the battlefield, a crack of primordial darkness splitting the sky. But Lug didn't flinch. Armed with the Tathlum, a mystical sling stone forged from the sea god Manannan's treasures, he took aim not at Balor's eye, but through it. The stone shot into the searing void, punching through the giant's skull in a geyser of black flame. The irony was exquisite. Balor's own killing gaze became the conduit for his death, his curse turned against him. As the giant king toppled, his eye's fury erupted backward, incinerating rows of Fomorian warriors in a final, fitting act of self-destruction. What makes this myth unforgettable isn't just the spectacle, it's the layers of poetic justice. Lug, the outsider, was Balor's own kin, born of Ethlyn's secret union with the god Sion. The grandson foretold had arrived not through brute force but cunning and skill. Even Balor's tower of isolation became his downfall. His attempt to thwart prophecy only ensured its fulfillment. The aftermath rippled through Celtic lore. Balor's eye, sinking into the earth, became Loch Nosul, the Lake of the Eye. Its waters still said to bubble with residual malice, and Lug, he didn't just inherit a throne. He inherited the mantle of a culture hero, proving that tyranny, no matter how monstrous, can always be outthought. The lesson lingers: some giants don't need to be overpowered. They just need to be seen clearly and met with the perfect strike at the perfect moment. Deep in the cedar forests of Mesopotamia, where the scent of resin clung thick to the air, the giant Humbaba stood as both guardian and prisoner. His face was a storm carved into flesh-coiled intestines for a beard, a roar that could shake the roots of mountains. Enlil had placed him there not just to protect the sacred trees, but to shield mortals from their own arrogance. Enter Gilgamesh, the king who feared nothing except the one thing he couldn't conquer: time. His quest to slay Humbaba wasn't about timber or glory. It was a desperate gamble to etch his name into eternity, to prove even death couldn't touch a legend. The battle itself was less a clash than a tragedy unfolding. Humbaba wasn't some mindless beast. He wept as Gilgamesh's axe bit into his flesh, offering the cedar's secrets in exchange for mercy. "The gods will hear your cruelty," he warned, his voice like cracking stone. But Gilgamesh, drunk on his friend Enkidu's encouragement, saw only a trophy. When Humbaba's severed head rolled at his feet, the victory tasted hollow. The cedars, now unprotected, witched under the sun, their magic leaching into the soil. And the gods, they took note. What makes this myth so haunting isn't the violence, it's the aftermath. Enkidu's death, a direct reprisal for their hubris, forced Gilgamesh to confront the truth he'd been fleeing. Greatness doesn't defy mortality, it's defined by it. Humbaba's curse wasn't just words, it was the weight of understanding that no amount of conquest could fill the void where fear had festered. Even the mighty cedars, once vibrant with divine energy, became mere lumber in the end, just as Gilgamesh's triumphs turned to dust in his hands. But here's the twist later scribes often gloss over. In older versions of the epic, Humbaba isn't a monster, he's a scholar. His 7 radiant auras, described as cloaks of wisdom, suggest he was once a keeper of sacred knowledge, not just a mindless sentinel. Some tablets even imply Gilgamesh didn't just kill him, he silenced a living library, trading enlightenment for a king's fleeting renown. The lesson echoes through the ages. The things we destroy to prove our power are often the very things that could have made us wise. And in that irony lies the heart of the epic. Gilgamesh's journey didn't end with Humbaba's death, it began there. The giant's absence left him emptier than any battlefield ever could, sending him spiraling into his futile quest for immortality. Every step he took afterward across deadly oceans, into the garden of the gods, was a scream into the void Humbaba had once filled. The guardian's real power wasn't his strength, but his role as a mirror. In killing him, Gilgamesh didn't defeat mortality, he became it. Long before the Aztecs walked the earth, before their pyramids pierced the clouds or their cities buzzed with the hum of human life, another race ruled the land. The Quinametsin, colossal beings said to stand 10 times taller than men, were the architects of wonders that defied time itself. Legends claim their hands lifted the stones of Teotihuacan into place, stacking temples so precisely they seemed to float above the earth. But these giants were more than just builders. They were living paradoxes, creatures of myth, yet their footprints pressed so deeply into history that even the conquistadors would later unearth their massive bones, mistaking them for the remnants of biblical titans. What makes the Quinametsin so fascinating isn't just their size, it's their tragic role as a bridge between worlds. According to Aztec cosmology, they belong to the previous sun, or era of creation, a time when gods and giants coexisted. But the universe operates in cycles, and when the age of the Quinametsin ended, it did so in cataclysm. Some say the heavens themselves collapsed upon them. Others whisper of a great flood sent by the gods to cleanse the earth for humankind. The most haunting version, that they starved, their massive bodies unable to sustain themselves as the land withered around them. Whatever the truth, their downfall wasn't just destruction, it was a cosmic necessity, making room for the smaller, more adaptable humans who would inherit the earth. The ruins of Teotihuacan stand as silent witnesses to their legacy. The Pyramid of the Sun, its base wide enough to swallow entire plazas, bears construction techniques later cultures couldn't replicate. Modern archaeologists still debate how its builders, whether Quinametsin or men, aligned it perfectly with celestial events, but the Aztecs had no doubt. When they discovered the abandoned city centuries later, they named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were made. To them, only giants could have raised such monuments. It was a sacred graveyard of a lost race, a reminder that even the mightiest beings answer to the turning of time's wheel. Yet the Quinametsin story doesn't end with their extinction. In Aztec myth, their spirits lingered, woven into the fabric of the world. When Tlaloc, the rain god, summoned storms, the rolling thunder was said to be the giants' distant voices. Earthquakes, their restless stirring beneath the soil. Even their bones held power ground into powder. They were rumored to heal ailments or grant visions of the past. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a profound acknowledgement that the past never truly dies. The Quinametsin, though gone, shaped the world that came after them. Their stones became foundations, their stories became warnings. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the Aztecs' own reverence for these giants. Unlike other cultures that painted their predecessors as brutish foes, the Aztecs saw the Quinametsin as tragic figures, beings too vast for a world that had moved on. Their fate was a cautionary tale about hubris, yes, but also about the inevitability of change. Every civilization, no matter how grand, eventually becomes someone else's myth. And that, more than anything, is what makes their story endure, not as a footnote but as a mirror. When the Spanish toppled Tenochtitlan's temples, the Aztecs, in their final moments, might have understood the Quinametzin better than ever. The rivers of Izumo ran red the night Susanoo found the weeping family, their sorrow as thick as the storm clouds that followed him. Once a celestial prince, now a disgraced wanderer, the god of storms had been cast out of the heavens for his reckless tantrums, yet here, in the shadow of a grieving household, he saw a chance to reclaim his purpose. Their eighth daughter, Kushinahaim, was bound to a stake, her fate sealed as the next sacrifice to Yamata no Orochi, the eight-headed serpent that terrorized the land. The beast was no ordinary monster. Its scales were blackened iron, its 8 throats gulped entire rivers dry, and its writhing bodies flattened forests into kindling. But Susanoo didn't see a foe, he saw a riddle begging to be solved. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was a masterclass in divine cunning. Susanoo transformed Kushinahaim into a comb, tucking her safely into his hair, then set his trap. He ordered 8 massive vats of sake brood, each one potent enough to dizzy a lesser god. When Orochi came slithering, drawn by the scent, it didn't hesitate, each head plunged into a vat, gulping until the alcohol dulled its senses. As the serpent's many necks tangled in drunken stupor, Susanoo drew his sword and began carving. The clash was less a fight than a gruesome harvest, each severed head thudding to the ground like felled timber. But the real treasure lay in the creature's tail, a blade so sharp it split Susanoo's own sword when he struck the legendary Kusanagi note Tsurugi, future emblem of Japan's imperial throne. The deeper meaning here is as coiled as Orochi's many necks. This wasn't just a monster's demise, it was the birth of a nation's identity. The 3 sacred treasures of Japan, the sword Kusanagi, the mirror Yota no Kagami, and the jewel Yasukuni no Magatama, became symbols of divine mandate, passed down through emperors as proof of their heavenly right to rule. Yet the sword's origin story is steeped in paradox. Pulled from the carcass of chaos itself, it embodies a profound truth. Legitimacy often springs from the very forces it seeks to conquer. Susanoo's victory also reshaped his legacy. The storm god, once a symbol of destructive caprice, became a culture hero. His cleverness against Orochi revealed a deeper wisdom, that brute force pales next to strategy. Even his weapon's fate reflects this duality. Kusanagi, though revered, was said to carry Orochi's lingering malice. When used recklessly, it summoned storms. When respected, it ensured victory. The serpent's death wasn't an end, but a transformation, its power absorbed into the tools of empire, a reminder that no victory is ever absolute. Modern Shinto rituals still echo this myth. At the Atsuta shrine, where Kusanagi is said to be enshrined, priests perform ceremonies to appease the blade's volatile spirit. The lesson endures, the line between guardian and monster is razor thin, and even the gods must tread carefully when wielding the remnants of what they've slain. The waters of Hawaii had never known a love story so bittersweet or so deadly as the tale of Tuna the eel and Hina, the radiant maiden of the moon. Tuna wasn't just a creature of the river, he was a shape-shifting god, a being who could stretch as long as the horizon when he wished, his scales shimmering like liquid obsidian. For years, he and Hina met in secret beneath the waterfall of Manoa, where the mist hid their embraces. But love between a goddess and a shapeshifter was never meant to last. When Hina's brothers discovered their affair, their fury shook the islands. To them, Tuna was no suitor. He was a predator, his coils choking the life from their sister's future. The chase that followed was less a hunt than a cataclysm. Tuna fled upstream, his massive body carving valleys into the earth as Hina's brothers pursued him with spears and sacred chants. Cornered at last, the eel giant made his final plea. "Cut off my head," he told Hina, his voice thick with sorrow. "Bury it in the sand, and from it will grow a gift for your people." When the blade fell, the earth itself seemed to shudder. Where Tuna's head was planted, a strange sapling sprouted, its bark as rough as his scales, its fruit round and heavy like his skull. The first coconut tree grew there, its husk matted with fibrous hair resembling the eel's last writhing tendrils, its milk the tears of their doomed romance. But the myth refuses to end as a simple tragedy. Crack open a coconut today, and you'll find 3 dark indentations, Tuna's watching eyes, forever guarding the woman he loved. The tree's towering height, a final act of devotion, lifting its fruit toward the moon where Hina now resides. Even the act of husking a coconut echoes the violence of his death, the machete strike mirroring the brother's vengeance. Yet every sip of its sweet water is a reminder. From destruction springs sustenance, and even the fiercest love stories leave roots behind. What elevates this tale beyond folklore is its lingering presence in daily Polynesian life. Fishermen still whisper Tuna's name when eels slip through their nets, half in respect, half in warning. The coconut itself is called the tree of life for a reason. Its flesh feeds, its fibers clothe, its shells become vessels. The eel god's curse became his covenant, his body now woven into the very fabric of survival. Perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in the duality of Tuna's legacy. He is both lover and monster, both nurturer and prey. The tree that memorializes him is both lifeline and tombstone, its fruit sustaining those who ended him. In that paradox, the myth whispers a truth as old as the tides. Nothing in this world is purely one thing, not gods, not giants, and certainly not love. Deep in the bone-white birch forests of Slavic myth, where the wind carried whispers older than memory, Koshchei the Deathless lurked, a giant whose cruelty was matched only by his cunning. Unlike the rampaging titans of other legends, Koshchei wasn't a mindless force of nature. He was a sorcerer king, his power coiled in riddles and enchantments, his very name meaning the bony one. His body, gaunt as a winter branch, seemed more relic than flesh, yet he moved with the predatory grace of a wolf circling prey. Heroes who sought to slay him soon learned the truth behind his epithet. Koshchei couldn't be killed, not by sword, fire, or even the god's wrath, because his soul wasn't in his body at all. The secret to his immortality was a nesting doll of dark magic. His soul lay hidden inside a needle, the needle inside an egg, the egg inside a duck, the duck inside a hare, the hare locked in an iron chest buried beneath the roots of the world tree. To defeat him, one had to unravel this grotesque puzzle in reverse, a task as perilous as threading a needle in a hurricane. Yet the brilliance of Koshchei's myth lies not just in his invulnerability, but in what it reveals about Slavic cosmology. Death wasn't an absolute, it was a contract, and Koshchei had found the loophole. By externalizing his soul, he'd cheated the natural order, becoming a walking affront to both mortals and deities. Ivan Tsarevich, the prince who finally outwitted him, didn't rely on brute strength. He used patience and trickery, mirroring Koshchei's own methods. Disguised as a beggar, he charmed the sorcerer's captive bride, Maria Morvna, into revealing the location of the chest. When Koshchei pursued him, Ivan released the hare, duck, and egg in succession, each creature's flight a ticking clock racing against the giant's wrath. The climax, crushing the egg to snap the needle, was less a battle than a metaphysical surgery, severing Koshchei's tether to existence itself. Yet even in death, Koshchei left a chilling legacy. Some tales say his laughter still echoes in blizzards, his bones scattered but not wholly destroyed. His myth endures as a warning. Immortality isn't a gift but a theft, from nature, from meaning, even from oneself. And perhaps that's why he fascinates us. Koshchei wasn't just a villain, he was a dark reflection of humanity's own hunger to conquer mortality, a reminder that some victories come at too high a price. The forests of Yorubal and shimmered with an unnatural stillness the day the Ejimo arrived, not as invaders, but as illusions given flesh. These chameleon giants weren't mere reptiles grown large. They were living paradoxes, their scales shifting not just to blend in, but to reflect the very essence of whatever they touched. When the Orisha Shango, god of thunder, raised his lightning axe against them, the Ejimo didn't flee. Their skins darkened to storm clouds, swallowing his strikes whole. When Oya, mistress of winds, hurled tornadoes their way, their bodies turned translucent as mist, letting the gales pass through harmlessly. This wasn't just resistance, it was a celestial game of mirrors, the Ejimo proving that rebellion could be as fluid as color on a lizard's back. But the Ejimo's defiance ran deeper than trickery. In Yoruba cosmology, chameleons symbolize adaptability and the liminal creatures who exist between worlds, neither fully of the earth nor the spirit realm. By challenging the Orishas, these giants weren't just rejecting divine authority, they were questioning the rigid boundaries between order and chaos. Their leader, Aroni, spoke in riddles that made even Oren Miller, the god of wisdom, pause. If the sky claims to rule the earth, why does it never touch the ground? The message was clear: power that refuses to adapt becomes its own prison. The conflict reached its climax not on a battlefield, but in a grove of sacred Iroko trees. Cornered at last, the Ejimo didn't fight, they transformed. One by one, they pressed their bodies into the bark, their scales hardening into rough patterns still visible today. To the untrained eye, they became mere markings on wood, but carvers know better. When an Iroko tree is felled, its wood resists knives with unnatural toughness until the craftsman whispers apologies to the Ejimo's spirit, proof that some rebellions never truly end. They just change form. What makes this myth endure isn't the spectacle, but its radical philosophy. The Ejimo weren't vanquished, they were assimilated, their essence woven into Yoruba art, architecture, and even diplomacy. Their lesson lives on in the Ogboni society, whose elders use chameleon motifs to symbolize the balance between tradition and change. Even Shango, once their foe, adopted their fluidity. His priests wear robes dyed with patterns mimicking the Ejimo's scales, a tacit admission that the gods too must evolve. The final irony: in modern Nigeria, scientists discovered that chameleons don't just camouflage, they communicate through color shifts. The Ejimo, it seems, were never hiding. They were speaking, and if we listen close, their challenge still echoes. How much of what we call divinity is just refusal to change? Beneath the golden sands of Egypt, where the Nile's lifeblood met the endless desert, the earth itself had a voice, and its name was Jeb. This wasn't just some abstract force of nature. Jeb was a god with a body as vast as the horizon, his spine the mountain ranges, his laughter the rumble of boulders tumbling down cliffs. But when he fought, that's when the world trembled. Ancient texts describe Jeb not as a mere deity, but as a living landmass, a giant whose very movements could split the ground open like overripe fruit. His battles with Nut, the sky goddess arched eternally above him, weren't just domestic spats between cosmic spouses. They were tectonic events, their clashes writing disaster into the bedrock of human history. The most legendary of these conflicts began with a simple act of defiance. Nut, the star-studded sky, had swallowed the sun god Ra's children, a betrayal that sent Ra into a fury. He decreed Nut wouldn't give birth in any month of the year, effectively trapping the unborn deities within her celestial body. But Jeb refused to let his beloved suffer. With a roar that shook the pillars of the Juwat, the Egyptian underworld, he arched his back like a colossal bridge, lifting Nut higher into the heavens. The strain cracked his stony flesh, creating valleys where none had been before. Thunder rolled not from the sky, but from beneath the earth, Jeb's growls of exertion as he reshaped the world to protect his family. This wasn't just poetic metaphor. The Egyptians saw direct correlations between Jeb's struggles and real-world disasters. When earthquakes shattered cities along the Nile, priests interpreted them as Jeb rolling over in his sleep. Fissures that swallowed homes whole, those were the earth god's fingers digging into his own flesh during particularly vivid nightmares. Even the annual flooding of the Nile carried echoes of this myth. Jeb's tears of joy when Nut finally gave birth, thanks to Thoth's gambit to create 5 extra days outside Ra's decree. But Geb's connection to giants runs deeper than mere seismic activity. In temple reliefs at Karnak, artists depicted him with green skin, not just to symbolize vegetation, but to emphasize his kinship with the primordial giants of chaos. Like Apep, the serpent who attacked Ra's son Bark, Geb represented the untamed wildness of the earth itself. The difference, Geb was domesticated, woven into the fabric of Maat's order. His battles with Nut weren't true rebellions, they were the necessary tensions that kept the cosmos in balance. Without his rumbling discontent, the sky would stagnate. Without Nut's resistance, the earth would grow rigid. Modern geologists might scoff at the idea of a god causing earthquakes, but the Egyptians understood something science is only now confirming. The earth isn't an inert rock. It breathes, shifts, and occasionally roars with enough force to rewrite human civilization in an instant. Geb's myth captures that terrifying agency better than any Richter scale ever could. When he turns over in his sleep, entire dynasties wake up screaming. Perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in Geb's duality. He's both nurturer and destroyer, his fertile soil birthing crops even as his quakes bury cities. The Egyptians didn't worship him out of fear alone. They recognized that creation and catastrophe are two sides of the same scarab. To live on Geb's back meant accepting both his generosity and his temper, just as we today build skyscrapers on fault lines, gambling that the giant beneath us will keep sleeping a little while longer. And in that tension between stability and upheaval, Geb's legacy endures. Every time the ground shudders somewhere in the world, somewhere, an Egyptian might have nodded knowingly. Not an earthquake, just Geb shifting his weight again, restless as ever beneath the sky's embrace. The heavens themselves groaned under Gong Gong's fury. This wasn't just a giant, he was catastrophe given form, a tempest wrapped in scales, his serpentine body thrashing through rivers and mountains as if they were mere cobwebs. As the water god of ancient China, Gong Gong commanded floods with a flick of his tail, but his true power lay in his wrath. When he lost the celestial throne to the fire god Zhurong in a battle that scorched the skies, his rage didn't just shake the earth, it shattered the very pillars holding up the cosmos. Legend describes these pillars as colossal mountains, their peaks piercing the dome of heaven, their roots anchoring the world's corners. One stood in the east at Baju Mountain, a place where stars brushed the earth. In his madness, Gong Gong charged it head first, his horns cracking the stone with a sound like 1,000 thunderstorms. The impact sent fissures racing through the sky, tilting the heavens northwest and sending the earth lurching southeast. Stars tumbled from their paths, rivers reversed direction, and the worst was yet to come without the pillar's support. The celestial dam holding back the waters of the void burst open, unleashing a flood that drowned the world. But here's where the myth twists. Gong Gong's rampage wasn't just senseless destruction, it was cosmic correction. Ancient Chinese philosophy saw balance as fluid, not fixed. The tilt he created wasn't merely damage, it became the reason rivers flow southeast to this day, why the sun and moon slide westward, and why China's geography slopes like a giant bowl. Without that cataclysm, the world would have been static, lifeless. Even the floods, for all their horror, deposited the rich silt that made the Yellow River Valley fertile. Nuwa, the serpent-tailed goddess of creation, intervened before the damage became irreversible. SHE Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter smelted stones of 5 colors to patch the broken sky and used the legs of a giant turtle to steady the 4 corners of the earth. Yet she left the heavens tilted. Some say it was an act of mercy, acknowledging that perfection wasn't sustainable. Others whisper it was a warning. Even gods must bow to consequence. Gong Gong's legacy lingers in every monsoon, every earthquake. He's the reason Chinese folklore treats floods as both disaster and necessity, a duality mirrored in his own nature. As the embodiment of water's dual power to nourish and drown, he reminds us that chaos isn't the enemy of order but its shadow. The pillars never stood straight again, and maybe that's the point. The world isn't meant to be perfectly balanced, it's meant to flow. Along the sun-blasted coast of Peru, where the desert meets the roaring Pacific, the ruins of Pachacamac whisper of a time when giants walked among mortals. These were no ordinary beings, towering servants of the creator god Pachacamac himself, their bodies hewn from the same stone as the sacred temples they built. According to Inca legend, these colossi could lift boulders the size of houses, their footsteps carving the terraces that still cling to the mountainsides today. But their strength came with a price. Each bore a hollow in their chest where a heart should beat, for Pachacamac had shaped them to serve without question, without desire. That is, until the day they learned to want. The rebellion began not with war cries but with silence. One by one, the giants laid down their tools, their stone fingers curling into fists as they turned their empty eyes toward the heavens. Some say it was the tears of the enslaved Huari people forced to toil alongside them that stirred their dormant spirits. Others claim the moon goddess Mama Quilla whispered secrets of freedom into their ears as they slept. Whatever the spark, the giants demanded what no celestial servant ever had: souls of their own. Pachacamac's wrath was swift and terrible. Rather than grant their plea, he froze them where they stood, their bodies hardening into the very rock they'd once shaped. Today, the jagged cliffs of the Loren Valley bear their faces, mouths forever open in silent protest, torsos twisted as if caught mid-stride. The Inca warned their children never to touch these stones at dusk, for the giants still dream beneath their mineral skins. Tap the rock and you might hear a low, rhythmic thumping, not a heartbeat, but the echo of hammers striking the earth, a sound that hasn't faded in 1,000 years. But here's what the conquerors missed when they later looted Pachacamac's temples. The petrification wasn't just punishment. The god had, in his own ruthless way, granted their wish. By merging them with the land, he made them eternal. Every earthquake that rumbles through Peru is said to be the giants shifting in their stony slumber, their restless energy still shaping the world long after their rebellion was crushed. The lesson lingers in the dust. Even the most obedient creations may one day awaken, and no power, divine or mortal, can truly silence a voice that's learned to roar. The gates of the underworld groaned as Inanna, queen of heaven, pounded her fist against the black stone. She didn't come to Ker, the monstrous giant who personified death itself, as a supplicant. She came as a challenger, her divine robes swapped for humble garments, her crown left behind in the dust. This wasn't just a descent, it was a calculated gamble. The Sumerians knew Ker not as a mere creature, but as the living embodiment of the underworld's crushing weight, his body a labyrinth of coiled roots and jagged bedrock. To face him was to stare into the abyss that even gods feared. Yet Inanna stepped forward, each of the 7 gates stripping away another layer of her power until she stood naked before Ker's gnashing teeth. What makes this myth so gripping isn't just the confrontation, it's the symbolism woven into every detail. The 7 gates mirror the 7 celestial spheres Inanna ruled above, a deliberate inversion of her domain. Ker's victory seems absolute when he strikes her down, hanging her corpse on a hook like butchered meat. But here's the twist: Inanna's death wasn't defeat. It was a metamorphosis. By enduring Ker's grasp, she absorbed the very essence of what she sought to conquer. Her resurrection 3 days later, brokered by the clever god Enki, wasn't a return to her old self. She emerged changed, carrying the knowledge of death within her, a goddess now fluent in both light and shadow. The deeper layers revealed themselves in the aftermath. Inanna didn't leave Ker's realm alone. She dragged her husband Dumuzi down in her place, a chilling reminder that even love bends to the underworld's laws. Some interpretations suggest this wasn't betrayal but necessity. The Sumerians understood death as a cycle. For one to rise, another must fall. Ker, in his relentless hunger, wasn't just a monster. He was the engine of renewal, the grinding wheel that sharpened existence itself. Modern excavations of cuneiform tablets hint at an even darker subtext. Earlier versions of the myth describe Ker not as a singular giant, but as the underworld's living architecture, his ribs the vaulted ceilings of the dead, his breath the whispering drafts between tombs. Inanna's journey, then, becomes less a battle and more an assimilation, her divine flesh pressed against the teeth of the cosmos until she and Ker became momentarily indistinguishable. The lesson lingers like smoke from a funeral pyre. True power isn't just reigning over life, it's staring into death's maw and emerging with its secrets etched into your bones. Every spring, when Sumerian priests reenacted Inanna's resurrection, they weren't just celebrating her return. They were acknowledging the unspoken pact between heaven and Ker, that even the brightest light is shaped by the darkness it pierces. The air itself turned to poison the day Typhon rose from Tartarus, a tempest-given flesh, a hurricane with teeth. His very name meant whirlwind, but no word could capture the horror of his form. 100 serpent heads, each one screaming storms, his legs ending in vipers that hissed with the voices of the damned. When he stretched his arms, they scraped the stars from east to west. When he roared, even Olympus trembled. This wasn't just another titan seeking vengeance. This was the earth itself rebelling against the god's order, a primal force Zeus could neither bribe nor reason with. Their battle reshaped the geography of myth. Typhon tore up mountains like weeds, hurling them at the sky until the heavens bled lightning. He wrenched Zeus's sinews from his limbs, stuffing the king of gods into a cave like discarded armor. For a moment, it seemed the cosmos would unravel until Hermes, the cunning messenger, stole back Zeus's strength and restored him to the fight. The final clash didn't end with ceremony or mercy. Zeus buried Typhon beneath Mount Etna, where the giant's thrashing still fuels eruptions, his fiery breath lighting the Sicilian night. Yet Typhon's legacy isn't just destruction, it's paradox. As much as he embodies chaos, he's also the reason for the seasons. Ancient Greeks believed his storms purified the air, his tantrums shaking stagnation from the world. Even his imprisonment served a purpose. The volcanic soil birthed from his torment became some of the Mediterranean's most fertile land. The same rage that threatened to destroy civilization also renewed it. Modern volcanologists might scoff at the idea of a buried giant, but the myth survives in subtle ways. When Etna rumbles, locals still say Typhon is turning. When hurricanes rage, their spiral arms mirror his serpentine limbs. The Greeks understood something science now confirms: chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's the crucible that forges it. Zeus's victory over Typhon wasn't just about might. It was about containment, not conquest. By binding the giant beneath the earth rather than erasing him entirely, the king of gods acknowledged a truth that still resonates: some forces are too vast to destroy. The best we can do is learn to live above their fire. The sky turned the color of wet iron the day Thor met Hrungnir on the battlefield, not in some distant realm, but right in Asgard's sacred meadows, where the clashing of their weapons would stain the grass with powdered stone and divine blood. Hrungnir wasn't just any giant. His legs were living bedrock, his skull a helmet of solid flint, and his heart a three-cornered slab of stone grinding like millstones with every pulse. He'd arrived drunk on his own arrogance, boasting he'd smash Asgard's walls and carry off Freyja as his bride. But what made this duel legendary wasn't just the brute force, it was the sheer absurdity woven into every moment. Their battle began with a throw so reckless it reshaped the landscape. Hrungnir hurled his whetstone, a slab sharp enough to split mountains, straight at Thor's head. The thunder god retaliated with Mjolnir, sending it spinning like a blazing comet. The weapons collided midair, and here's where myth defies expectation. The whetstone shattered, but not before a shard embedded itself in Thor's forehead, a wound that would ache for centuries, a permanent reminder that even gods bleed. Meanwhile, Mjolnir didn't just crush Hrungnir's skull. It pulverized him so completely that when the giant fell, his stone body fused with the earth, forming the jagged plains of Jötnar. But the real twist came after the killing blow. As Hrungnir's colossal corpse collapsed, his leg pinned Thor beneath its weight. None of the other gods could lift it, not even Odin's might. Enter Magni, Thor's 3-year-old son, who nonchalantly hoisted the leg like it was kindling. The moment was equal parts triumphant and humiliating, a toddler showing up the entire pantheon while Thor lay there spitting dirt, his pride as bruised as his ribs. Then there's the heart. That infamous 3-cornered stone heart kept beating even after Hrungnir's death, its grating rhythm unnerving enough that Thor ordered it thrown into the deepest fjord. But legends say on quiet nights, if you press your ear to certain rocks in Norway, you can still hear it, a slow, relentless crunch like teeth gnawing at the roots of the world. What makes this myth endure isn't just the spectacle, it's the contradictions. Hrungnir was a fool, yet his stone heart outlived him. Thor won, yet walked away wounded. Even Magni's triumph carried a quiet warning. Strength isn't always where you expect it. The Norse didn't tidy their myths into neat morals. They left them jagged like Hrungnir's shattered bones, so every retelling could draw fresh blood. From the frost-bitten wastes of Norse myth to the sun-scorched temples of Babylon, the battles between gods and giants were never just about strength. They were about the very fabric of existence. Chaos and order, wildness and structure, rebellion and control, these aren't just ancient conflicts. They're the eternal tensions that shape every civilization. The giants weren't always villains. Often they were the raw, untamed forces the gods needed to harness or suppress. To build their worlds, Ymir's corpse became the soil of Midgard. Tiamat's body was carved into the heavens. Even the defeated Puron runner of the Andes left their bones in the earth as a warning and a gift. What's striking isn't just how similar these myths are across cultures, but how they reflect the fears and aspirations of the people who told them. The Greeks feared typhon storms, but they also knew volcanic soil grew the richest crops. The Aztecs dreaded the Tzitzimitls eclipses, but they understood darkness made the sun's return meaningful. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were survival manuals, teaching balance in a world where too much order stifles and too much chaos destroys. And that's the real magic here. These myths endure because they're not relics, they're mirrors. When we binge disaster movies or root for the underdog, we're replaying the same tensions our ancestors wrestled with. The gods may have won most of the battles, but the giants never really disappeared. They're in every earthquake we can't control, every storm we weather, even in our own rebellious streaks that chafe against rules and routines. So now it's your turn. Which of these colossal clashes resonated most with you? Was it Thor's never-ending feud with the Jötnar, or maybe Susanu's clever takedown of Orochi? Drop your favorites in the comments, or better yet, tell us about a myth we didn't cover, because these stories aren't finished. They're still being told, still evolving, just waiting for the next voice to add to the legend. And who knows, maybe your pick will be the spark for our next deep dive into the wild, untamed corners of myth. After all, the best stories, like the best giants, never truly die. They just wait for the right moment to rise again.